Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told out of Voice of Radio. So today, we need to talk about Eternatus. And look, I am well aware that this is not the first time we've talked about Eternatus. We have, in fact, shock horror, talked about Eternatus before. We've, in fact, talked about Eternatus VMAX before. This is not a new thing. But this is a new build of Eternatus, and I am all in favour of this new build of Eternatus. It looks awesome. Now, it is still an Eternatus VMAX at the end of the day, an Eternatus VMAX deck, so we've got what we've always had. An awesome ability that allows you to have 8 bench Pokemon just so long as you only have Darkness Pokemon. And then an attack for 2 energy that does 30 damage for each of your Darkness Pokemon in play, which of course should then hit 270 for 2 energy, which incidentally is really, really good. This is a good thing to do. So what's changed? And the answer is the supporting cast. Now, don't get me wrong, the supporting cast is not entirely new. Clearly, Crobat is still the best partner here. It's a Darkness Pokemon, and when you play it from your hand to your bench, you draw till you got 6 cards in your hand. It is the reason why Eternatus works. If we didn't have a good Darkness-type draw engine, this deck would never have been good. But we do, so it is. And my boy Spiritomb. Now, I've got 2 lists I'm actually going to show you. One of them plays... Actually, no, I think they both play one Spiritomb, to be fair. Yay! We like Spiritomb, basically. So, Spiritomb's got that awesome ability that puts a damage counter on it, and an attack that does 10 damage plus 30 more for each damage counter on it. You essentially sit it on the bench, you build up the damage, and then when you can take a KO, it's awesome being able to take a KO without using Eternatus VMAX. And then, of course, Galarian Zigzagoon is an absolute no-brainer here. Galarian Zigzagoon, when you play it from your hand to your bench, you drop 1 damage counter on one of your opponent's Pokemon. And it's a Darkness Pokemon, so it helps to fuel your attack. But, you know, there's little things like Arcus and Alga and Palkia, you're 10 damage short of getting a KO. So this comes in very, very nicely indeed. The big difference, and this is the big difference and what has made the deck so much better, is that we are seeing fat lines here of Galarian Weezing. And when I say fat lines, I mean we're talking like a 4-3 line. We're not talking about a 1-1 tech line here. We are talking about a fat line being put into the deck as a key part of the deck. Now, Galarian Weezing has got a rather lovely ability that turns off abilities. Your opponent's Pokemon in play have no abilities except for neutralizing gas, i.e. your opponent can have their own Galarian Weezing to turn off your abilities. And this is going to just slow decks down. It's going to turn off all of those draw abilities, etc. And then there are decks like Frostmoth, for instance, who really rely on abilities, and ha. And of course, one of the best ways to get your opponent's Pokemon out of the active nowadays is Fione, but Fione is an ability, which means that your opponent's not going to be able to use it to get your Galarian Weezing out the active. There'll be turns they have boss's orders, but they're not going to have boss's orders every turn, so ha. And of course it means they've got to choose between abilities and supporter draw, because every turn they use a supporter to turn off your abilities, they're not actually using a supporter to draw any cards, and that in and of itself is kind of hilarious. And this is basically the new way to play the deck. Now, like I say, I've got a couple of winning lists here from a couple of tournaments over in Japan, and this is pretty big. And what we're essentially doing is we've almost got a 2-sided deck here. You can either go aggro with Eternatus, which will work, it's been working all the way along, or you can slow the game right down with Galarian Weezing. But why were we not playing Galarian Weezing before? And the answer is because we didn't have the coughing from Shining Fates. But now we do have the coughing from Shining Fates, which has got the attack ascension. For a single darkness energy, bearing in mind all your energy is going to be darkness, you evolve up. So if you go second in an Eternatus deck, up until now, your best play has been attacking with Eternatus V, hoping you've got a second energy in hand to attach to a second Eternatus V. And incidentally, right, Eternatus VMAX is my favourite metagame deck at the moment. When I'm not playing Excadrill, I'm probably playing Eternatus. But the fact that you've really got to get 2 energy and an evolution before you start doing anything of consequence is kind of terrifying in the early game. It means if your opponent can hit a couple of crushing hammers nice and early, you are going to be in a bad position. Like, if you don't have a second energy in hand for Power Accelerator, and then your opponent hits a crushing hammer, and believe me, that's happened to me probably about 100 times at this stage, and I'm not exaggerating, that is a game which is going downhill fast. So if you want to slow the game down, you whack Galarian Weezing in the active, your opponent has no abilities, and then you just poison them and they take 4 damage counters from poison between turns. Bearing in mind, of course, that one of the energies you will be playing is Hiding Darkness energy, so when you're ready to bring Eternatus VMAX active, you can retreat for free. You attach 1 energy to attack, and then you can retreat for free, and you are good to go. It's awesome. Now, incidentally, there is one other Pokemon that does see play in both, no, I'm lying to you. In one of the decks, they do actually play Sableye. Sableye, remember, for 2 energy, does 10 damage plus 60 for each damage counter on the defending Pokemon. So the deal here essentially is that you do a little bit of damage with Galarian Weezing, and after like 1 turn of poison, Sableye will KO basically anything. And we have actually seen Galarian Weezing decks that basically are just Galarian Weezing with Sableye. So being able to play that in an Eternatus deck is pretty gosh darned fun. Yeah, this is probably something to get a little bit excited about. Now, in terms of energy, we've got obviously Hiding Darkness energy, as I mentioned, and then of course Darkness energy is your main kind of energy here, why would it not be? And we do play a little bit of Capture energy here, because Capture energy will search out a basic Pokemon and put it on the bench. Bearing in mind you need to evolve your Stage 1, you need to evolve your Eternatus, and you've got an attack which depends on how many Pokemon you've got out, so yeah. That sounds pretty gosh darned important to me. Moving over into the trainer line, there is a lot of what we would generally expect here. So our supporters of choice are still Professor's Research, discard your hand, draw 7 cards. Marnie, both players shuffle their hands and put them on the bottom of their deck. Player who played it gets 5 cards, the other player gets 4. These are your draw cards of choice. And then we've got Boss's Orders to drag one of your opponent's Pokemon from the bench into the active, which normally would be to try and KO them, but if you are slowing the game down with Galarian Weezing, you could try and strand someone in the active here, and that would be quite a lot of fun indeed. In terms of Pokemon Search, we've got Quick Ball, which will get all your basics. We've got Pokemon Communication, which will go ahead and get any Pokemon, but you do have to swap a Pokemon in your hand for it. And one of the list does play Level Ball here, but again, you're playing so many Pokemon like Spiritomb, like Galarian, Zigzagoon, like Coughing, that actually a couple of Level Ball here is big. And remember, when we're talking Eternatus, you need to fill your bench to hit maximum damage, so any card that's going to help you fill your bench, that seems like a pretty good thing overall. But then we get to some slightly weirder options here. Now, one card that we do see in both of the decks here, which is a card which I'm going to go ahead and guess has probably not been on many people's radars, Tool Jammer. Yeah, that's right, Tool Jammer. A card that a lot of people just looked at and went meh, and then kind of ignored, and we haven't really talked about it since. Well, Tool Jammer is a tool, and when it's attached to the Pokemon in the active spot, Pokemon tools attached to your opponent's active Pokemon have no effect. So what you're turning off is tools like, oh, I don't know, maybe that Rusted Sword, which is coming in Shining Fates, which Zacian decks are going to use to do a whole bunch more damage. Maybe Air Balloon, which your opponent is going to use to try and get free retreat. Now, obviously, if you're getting giant one-hit KOs with Eternatus, this isn't going to be an issue. But if you can get, say, a Tool Jammer onto a Galarian Weezing in the active, then all of a sudden your opponent isn't using Air Balloon to go and get themselves some free retreat, which is kind of awesome. It's only played as a one-of in each deck, but it is played in both of the decks, and that alone is pretty gosh darned interesting. Obviously, we see a bunch of switching cards here, as one might expect, and our stadium of choice tends to be Power Plant. Nah, only kidding. It's Night City. To be fair, Power Plant does actually see play in one of the decks, turns off GX abilities, which is quite nice, but really here, we're going Dark City, which I'm pretty sure I just called Night City. It's blatantly Dark City. It gives basic Darkness Pokemon free retreat. Obviously, this won't work on Galarian Weezing, though remember, you've got your Hiding Darkness energy. But it is important to note that you can use this to get a Galarian Weezing into the active, or, you know, turn 1, whatever you've got in the active is going to be a basic Darkness Pokemon. So this gives you free retreat to get a Coughing active and use Ascension, and oh look, now you're ready to go. One of the lists, I should say, does also play Rose. That is the supporter card that discards your entire hand, but attaches 2 energy from your discard to your Pokemon VMAX. It's a kind of card you probably don't want to use because it, you know, discards your entire hand, but it's one of those if you really need an attack with Eternatus and you just don't have the energy, Rose will power up an Eternatus in one go, and then hopefully you draw something nice off your prizes. That would be good. Here is the first list. Now, this one does not play Sableye. It is a very straightforward with just, well, I say very straightforward. It's got the Eternatus stuff, and it's got the Galarian Weezing stuff, with obviously your Galarian Zigzagoon and Spiritomb. And here is the second deck. Now, there is a Mew there. Remember, if you play Mew, you can't have Eternatus' ability. And if you start Mew, you can't have Eternatus' ability, which is a little bit weird. It is actually worth pointing out that Scoop Up Net does seem to have been cut a little bit from these lists. But you kind of have to. You've got to make room for the Galarian Weezing line. It's a stage 1 line, right? So I don't believe, and correct me in the comments if I'm being dumb here, but I don't believe that we've actually got any Scoop Up Net in either of the decks here. Because, you know, it just kind of had to happen. Also, I've just noticed both lists are playing level ball. My apologies, they're both playing 2 level ball. So this is a list that does play Sableye, and the list that does play Rose, and it's a little bit trickier. We also do have EXP share there, which I didn't mention earlier. That's the one that if you have a Pokemon code in the active, you can move an energy to your bench Pokemon with EXP share. I like these decks. I think Eternatus just got a whole bunch better, and I love the idea of essentially playing 2 decks in one. You better believe this is the kind of deck that makes me excited. But I want to know what you think, so let me know in the comment section, would ya? Go nuts! Be nice! And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWasi, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCG Radio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that good stuff, head on over to patreon.com/PTCG Radio, where you can do exactly that. But by far the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.